So I think I was planning on getting it for 180, drove down to the auction, realized a few minutes before getting there that I didn't know who to make out my deposit check to.
Because you have to have money, right?
Check. You have to have 10% down.
Okay.
And so I had I stopped by the bank and I had put the wrong name on the check.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Home Keys Away podcast. It's been a while, but we're back in full force, and I got a super good guest with us today that's going to share some information regarding buying foreclosure homes here in Hawaii. Or that topic is super interesting to a lot of investors, home buyers, just anybody interested here in Hawaii. And so today we're going to uncover a lot of information in regards to what that process looks like, some things to look out for, some pros, cons, misconceptions, cover all of that. So if you're interested in learning about the foreclosure process, stay tuned, listen to this podcast or this video. You're in for a treat. So with all that being said, before I start, like always, please like, subscribe, do all the stuff. You know what to do. Do all the stuff you got to do. And make sure to follow for more Hawaii real estate information, whether you're buying, selling, or just interested in anything Hawaii real estate. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. But with all that being said, I want to introduce our guest here, a really good friend of mine, someone that I've known for a while now, and someone that when I first got into real estate, I would lean heavy on and just ask a bunch of questions. Always admired what he was doing up on the North Shore and just on the island in general. So, everybody, this is Jeremy Monker. This beautiful man right here. Am I right?
Thank you.
Just a little bio. I don't have too much. He graduated with his bachelor's in business from BYU Hawaii out in Laie. Shout out to all my Seasiders. He got his MBA from San Diego State University.
Yep.
And he's been a licensed realtor since 2014, so just about 10 years now. In the last couple of years, he got into the foreclosure part of it as a real estate commissioner.
Yeah, exactly. Foreclosure commissioner. So I basically conduct the auctions for the state for foreclosure cases that go through them.
Perfect. Which is why I wanted to get him on so he can kind of walk us through that process. And, we can learn a little bit about what that looks like. If anybody's interested in buying something foreclosure, where I get people all the time hitting me up saying, I want to buy foreclosure. I want to buy something that's really cheap.
Yeah.
And so we'll kind of unpack those layers and talk about it. Married with how many kids now?
2 kids. So we got a girl who's 3.5, and we got a son who's like a few months over 1.
Nice.
1 in 3 months, something like that.
Yeah.
So.
And 3 more on the way? 4 more on the way?
Dude, in my mind, it was always 4 kids.
Yeah.
And then the first one came along, and I was like, maybe 3 is good.
Sure.
And then we had the second one, and I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm good with 2.
Yeah.
So we're just getting to the point where our son is sleeping through most of the night.
Yes.
So I'm not even at a point where I can think about number 3.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Believe me. I forgot what that was like until baby came.
And that's why you have another one. You forget what it's like.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, cool. Well, what I wanted to start off with, Jeremy, and we kind of talked about this, is Jeremy has a super interesting path that he kind of took into foreclosure. So like I said, he was a super successful realtor for a long time. But then him and his wife bought their first home through the foreclosure process. Yeah. And so, if you don't mind, I would love for you to kind of share that process, what that was like. Yeah.
So I graduated from San Diego State in 2012, moved back here. I grew up in Temple Valley too. So Hawaii is home. Came back here in 2014, and that's when I started real estate. I didn't get married until 2016, and then we started looking seriously for a house around 2019.
Okay.
And, COVID kind of threw a wrench in that for a little while. But foreclosures were always kind of on my radar. I had heard about them. I didn't know a ton about them. Mm-hmm. We're a small company up on the North Shore, but we started making field trips down to the courthouse every now and then just to go watch the foreclosure auction.
Oh, so not for clients, but just to kind of...
Just for us,
really?
Just to kind of know. Yeah. And maybe we offer the service to clients because even though foreclosures aren't bought traditionally with realtors, a realtor can help you. And I actually think that they can be super valuable to a lot of people. There are those who understand foreclosures, titles, deeds, loans, all that goes into those. Mm-hmm. But I think a majority of people don't. Sure. And so we bought our foreclosure home with a conventional loan. it's not the norm. Foreclosures they're not contingent upon getting a loan or not. So you put your 10% down and they don't care whether or not your loan goes through.
Sure.
So you got to know beforehand, is this thing going to work or isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think realtors can still bring a lot to the table in this situation. It's just, I guess the question of compensation is more open. But that's kind of where things are
going
anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just a different avenue to buy real estate, but realtors can still be super helpful in the process. So for us though, it was actually beginning of 2020, and I wasn't checking them religiously.
Okay.
But every foreclosure is required to advertise in the Star Advertiser, or the state also has a website, but I checked on there was one from 2012. So nobody uses that. It's Star Advertiser.
Okay. They have to.
They have to.
Okay.
And actually, even if they advertise on the state one, they also have to do at least 1 week in the Star Advertiser.
Where's that at? Is that
So Star Advertiser, the physical edition, and it can be any day, but oftentimes it is Sunday.
Okay.
I don't know why that is, but oftentimes Sunday is the day you'll find the most. They also have an online section though.
Okay.
So you could Google like Hawaii foreclosures. I think the site is called hawaiisclassifieds.com.
Gotcha.
And there's a foreclosure section, legal notices, foreclosure. So you'll find that first advertisement there. For whatever reason, I decided to check it one day, early 2020, and I found one that was in Waikiki in the legal vacation rental zone.
Okay.
And so those don't come up often. I mean, the zones, legal vacation rental zones, are super rare on Oahu already.
To begin with,
and to be a foreclosure too. Yeah. So I was all hyped on this property. It was a legal 1-bedroom, full kitchen, meaning as a realtor, has to have a full kitchen to get a loan.
Yep.
Right. So checked all the boxes. And even if it wasn't in good condition, I knew I could get a renovation loan. Cost an extra quarter point or so, but you could get it done. This thing, and there are always no reserve. So it's always like there's no starting price. But the lender who's owed money, they're always going to send a representative to the auction. So the first thing the commissioner will do, who's conducting the auction, they'll turn to the lender representative and say, hey, what's your bid? So
they start it.
So even though it's always advertised no minimum, there is a starting point, and that's going to be based on what the lender is owed.
Okay.
So that was the case over here. The lender was owed something like $170,000 or so. And at the time, that was a pretty good deal, even if you could get it at 170, 180. So I think I was planning on getting it for 180, drove down to the auction, realized a few minutes before getting there that I didn't know who to make out my deposit check to.
Because you have to have money, right?
Check. You have to have 10% down.
Okay.
And so I had I stopped by the bank and I had put the wrong name on the check. So the commissioner got back to me last minute, told me, oh no, you can switch it to this. When I learned later on, like, it doesn't matter that much actually. Okay. You can change these things last minute. But at the time I didn't know. So I stopped by the bank. They took too long. I got there 5 minutes late. Auction was done.
No.
Because these auctions are like, they happen within a minute or so.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're not on time, you lose out.
Okay.
So anyway, that was like February 2020, and then COVID hit. So court shut down. Okay. But I was still tracking that one. I wanted to get that one. So the courts opened up kind of like summertime in the following year, 2021. And I was looking back at my records. I had emailed the commissioner about a month before the courts opened up. And I was just saying, hey, just checking in, let me know when this is going to go. Mm-hmm. She never got back to me.
Okay.
So by the time I heard anything more about it, it wasn't from her, and the auction was already done. So they have like a confirmation hearing, which is kind of a second auction.
Sure.
Anybody can come in, they can reopen bidding for 5%. So anyway, I lost out on that deal, but that got me checking them a lot more often.
Okay.
And what happened was just a couple months later, our house popped up, and it's we're in Hauula. We're right by the elementary school up there. It's a 2-story house, 4-bedroom, separate garage. The guy who owned it and built it was a mechanic.
Nice.
So he at one point had a hydraulic lift in there, like lots of space.
Also, big garage in.
Yeah. So pretty awesome place. Anyway, we were able to go check it out. They had an open house. We made it over there, and we were super into it. So we went to the auction, but I knew a couple of things. I knew, one, I had to use a loan. And if you got to use a loan, you have to have access to the property. You also have to know that the electric and the water are on and functioning. And so with commissioners or with auctions, whether or not you have access kind of depends on the commissioner you're working with.
Okay.
I found that attorneys are typically a little less willing to go out of their way to open a house. And there's good reason for that too. As a commissioner, you only get paid for a certain set of activities. And opening a house for an appraisal is not one of them.
Okay.
So there's no way for them to get reimbursed by the
So they're not going to do it.
They're not going to do it. Yeah.
For the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, our commissioner was an attorney. He told me multiple times, I'm not going to give you access to the house.
Okay.
So, because he knew we had to use a loan.
So when you're going, you're bidding.
Yeah.
Do you have to let them know, like, because majority of the people that are buying foreclosures are buying cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, but when you're going and buying with a loan, are you saying that? Like, do you have to let that be disclose that?
No, you don't have to disclose anything, and because in part the court doesn't care, right? It comes back to
sure.
It's completely as is. There's no contingencies. So whether or not your financing goes through doesn't matter. And if you can't get the financing, they've got your 10%.
Regardless. Yeah.
And if they want to, they can keep it. Now, I guess a side note on that, I've never seen them keep the whole thing.
Okay.
I've seen a couple people drop out, and usually what they'll do, like I had one case that we're still trying to close. There was a buyer before I came into it who had bid $130,000 or I'm sorry, 1.3 million. So they had $130,000 down payment. They backed out of the deal. The court ended up giving them $100,000 back and held $30,000 to cover future expenses. Yeah. So and the same thing happened with my buddy. He backed out. They kept some amount, and
all of it.
Yeah, and then in the end he got back whatever was left.
But in your guys' case, the commissioner knew you guys were doing a loan, and so
yeah, commissioner knew we were doing a loan, knew he wasn't going to give us access, and so he encouraged us multiple times not to bid at all. But and this is where individual choice.
Yeah.
But I knew as far as the loan goes, it was in good enough condition. Everything was working. I could get it to go through. I just needed access. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to get that, but I knew the commissioner wasn't going to give it to me. So anyway, we bid. We won. The bank bid like $796. I bid $798. Nobody else touched it.
Wow.
There was one other bidder, and there's a set of regular guys that you'll see at every auction.
Okay.
He was one of those, and I had seen him before, so I knew he was a pro. But he didn't touch it for whatever reason. So we got it at $798, which was an awesome deal.
Yeah.
We got it appraised to close the sale. Appraisal came in at $1.06 million. And there wasn't much work that needed to be done. So like we scored big time with this one. But still we had the access issue.
Sure.
So on the way home from the auction, my wife wanted to stop by the house, just like drive around the neighborhood a little bit. We stopped by, and there's a couple of trucks in the driveway. Turn out they had sent cleaners over there.
Okay.
And so kind of sketchy on my part.
Don't incriminate yourself, bro. Feel free to say what you got to say. Yeah.
It's far enough past now that I don't really care. But and actually, in the end, it's not. I don't think it's really my bad. But but the cleaner left the lockbox.
Oh, the code. Yeah.
So I took a picture of it. I knew the lockbox code. We came back later. Turned out she never locked the doors anyway.
Okay.
So it was just an open house, and the appraiser reached out. We walked through. Everything worked out fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Electric and water, you just turned it all on.
Electric water was all working.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. The previous owners never turned it off, and I guess they were still paying it.
And then, so the loan part, right? I mean, how did that work timeline wise?
Yeah, so that was a little bit tricky because with the loan, you got to lock in your rate at a certain point. But with the courts, there's no guarantee of when they're going to get their end together, right? And so after that confirmation hearing, you usually have about 2 months, and then the court has to approve what they call an order confirming sale.
Okay.
Once they do that, then you've usually got about 35 days to close the sale.
Okay.
But you don't know when that order is going to be issued.
I see.
Yeah, so that was the tricky part for us, and I actually was lucky. I had a good lender, somebody I've worked with for a while. He offered to cover an extension on my lock rate.
Okay.
My rate lock.
So how was, and we're gonna cover the whole process, right? We're gonna get to that in terms of what does it look like A to Z, but so going back to that point, in regards to the typical timeline, like for you guys, from when you bid it until you got your keys, what is that? How long was that?
Well, and so it can differ, right? So when it's first advertised in the Star Advertiser, typically you'll have the auction about a month after.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. Typically about a month, because they if they can, they'll do open houses, and this is kind of important too, because if they're doing open houses, usually it means the property's vacant.
Sure.
If the property's vacant, you got a much higher chance of actually getting an appraiser in later, doing all the things you would need to do if you're using a loan. And by the way, even if you're doing hard money, it's a lot easier for many of the requirements, but they're still going to require maybe not an appraisal, but an inspection at the very least. They want to get eyes on the property.
Sure.
Yeah. So typically you have about a month until that auction happens, but that first auction really doesn't mean much. People who are new to foreclosures, they'll show up at the auction, they'll win that one, they'll get all hyped on it thinking I'm getting the property. But they got this confirmation hearing that's going to come in about 2 months.
Okay.
And anybody can show up there and
outbid.
Yep. They just have to go 5% higher. And then bidding opens up to whoever else is interested too. So if somebody wins an auction at $100,000, that confirmation hearing comes along, somebody else can reopen at $105,000, and then bidding just continues.
It's open all over again.
Right. Yeah. So don't get too excited if you win the first one.
Okay.
Unless you bid a price that's high enough that it's not worth somebody doing the 5% overbid, most likely you're not going to get it.
Okay.
And that's why you'll see a lot of times at the initial auction, it's actually the lender, the lender that wins the bid. Yeah, because people would rather, for one, they don't want their money tied up.
Sure.
That confirmation hearing, like I said,
2 months.
Maybe 2 months, but maybe 3, maybe 4. Who knows? The courts are what they are, and they can take forever. Yeah. So oftentimes the professional guys, they'll win it at the confirmation, even though they have to overpay 5% in some cases.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so then you got that confirmation, and then you've got another usually couple months until they confirm the order, and then you've got another month before you actually close. So total time, you're usually looking at 6 months, and that's if everything goes smoothly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be longer.
Was that the case in your guys?
That was the case in ours. Ours was about the smoothest you could ask for.
Dang, so 6 months. So that's a good point, right? Lenders, I mean, super tricky if you're trying to work with a lender.
And that's why I say I think realtors can still bring a lot of value to this process, because if you're not familiar with all of that, that's a lot.
You're going to go in blind and
just a lot to learn on a crash course. Yeah.
And at any point, if for some reason within the 6 months you have to back out, let's say you don't have the cash anymore, you can't get the loan or whatnot, then your deposit or that 10% you put in is susceptible to be lost.
Exactly. So we put 80 grand down, and we didn't know for sure if we were going to make it work. Like I was pretty confident, but it wasn't 100% thing. So as all I knew at the time, I didn't know that they might keep some and give some back. I just knew if I put this down, I consider it gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the basic timeline though.
Okay.
About 6 months, but that's the best you can hope for, like I said.
And so what I wanted to talk about now, right, is kind of maybe some misconceptions or, just going over some general questions. Because it's funny, as a realtor, I get calls all the time, right? And what I've learned at this point is when people call and asking about foreclosures or anything like that, really all they're asking for is they want to find a good deal.
I want a deal.
Yeah, that's all it is, right? I want to find a cheap house. Sure. Like everybody wants a deal. But I think, like you said, I don't think people really understand what they're getting into if they're getting a foreclosure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is a percentage of the population that could handle that, where the scenario would work out perfectly as a first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think you kind of got to understand the liability you're stepping into.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess I say all that to say, what are some of, I guess, the biggest biggest mistakes you've seen or misunderstandings when it comes to foreclosure?
I think the big, well, and I kind of think two of them that I can think of offhand are things that people perceive as worse than they actually are.
Okay.
So one is condition. I mean, what do you think of
Yeah.
condition-wise when you think of foreclosure?
Because I think of like HGTV, right? You know, they're walking in, hoarders, stuff all over the ground.
Yep. And that happens.
Okay.
That's definitely part of it. A lot of these have been vacant for, I don't even know how long ours was vacant for, but I would say at least 3 to 5 years. So even if there's not hoarder stuff, that's just a lot of time for stuff to sit unused, uncared for.
Yep.
And we definitely had some work on ours. But I think the general conception is that you're going to walk into a disaster.
Sure.
Right? And that's not always the case. It just depends. So like ours was actually built in '09.
Oh, dang.
Which is much more recent than a lot of the houses you would buy on the market. It was in pretty good condition. Especially in Hauula, yeah. We probably put in 20 grand or so up front, just painting, doing little this and that's, you know. But we didn't have any major structural stuff to take care of.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first common misconception is that you're only looking at beaters that are going to need a ton of work. Let's see. Right now, I'm closing one in Eva Beach.
Okay.
And that one could probably use a good 20, 30,000.
A refresh.
Yeah, just a refresh. One I closed last year, same thing. It was a 2-bed apartment. That one, the guy who bought it put in 8 grand and then rented it out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so not much work there. Let's see, I did another one that was in Kapolei, right on the golf course, or sorry, Eva Beach, but right on the golf course over there. And same deal, probably 30,000 or so. Okay. So like there's definitely a good percentage of them that need more work than that, but you can find pretty nice properties as foreclosures.
And do you, right, because if you're buying a house conventionally, right, you have the opportunity to go look at the house.
Inspections.
You get a disclosure statement from the seller, right?
Contingency.
The seller lets you know everything. So you know what's broken, what's not. How does that differ in regards to foreclosure?
With open house, with foreclosures, you do have open houses if it's either vacant or the owner is cooperative.
Okay.
So
it's not required though.
It's not required. Yeah, the court can say we're going to sell this without the open house.
Sure.
So if you have the open house, then that's your only opportunity to walk through, make sure it is what you want. I will say that properties that don't have open houses tend to sell for a little less because you're taking on more risk. Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend it for your first one if you're going in kind of as a newbie. I would probably get something that is vacant that you can go to the open house. You can make sure it is what you want. But you know, sometimes like there won't be an open house, but it's for, I don't know, whatever reason, the commissioner didn't communicate well with the owner or couldn't communicate with the owner, just couldn't get access to the property. And we had a situation like this recently where they didn't have open houses, but there were kids still in the area of the previous owners had passed away, and that's why the house went to foreclosure. And the kids were pretty cooperative. They would let people in. So sometimes there's that kind of thing too, you know, like they typically will tell you not to approach the house if there's tenants in there.
Sure. Yeah.
But honestly, some of the aggressive investors, they'll still go. They'll knock on the door. They'll just try and chat them up, or chat up neighbors. You can get a lot of info that way too.
Okay.
But yeah. So as far as inspections go, the open house is your chance. That's it. So if you're really set on one, it's probably a wise thing to bring a contractor, bring
right away.
An inspector. Gotcha. Yeah. They're not going to have. Actually, open houses last for 3 hours. So I guess technically, if you wanted to hire an inspector, you could be there the whole time.
Sure. Yeah.
They're not going to kick them out, but I've never seen it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're and with the foreclosure, right? You're taking on every and all liability with the house. Like there is nobody you can run to in regards to asking for price reductions or anything
No,
or
no,
credits.
no.
Not
There's none of that. Yeah. Whatever you lock in at the auction, that's what you're on the hook for. Yeah. Yeah.
So with a loan then, because right, like we know sometimes depending which loan program you're at, but they're gonna require certain things, or the house has to be livable to a certain degree. So if you, let's say you have to get a loan
Yep.
to buy the home, you put you down your 10%, and you can't lend on it.
Tough luck.
That's
Yeah.
it, right? There's
So if you're looking conventional, then you're tough luck. We mentioned renovation loans before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So typically with a renovation loan, you're going to have to put a little more cash down. So it's a good idea to have a healthy amount of cash reserves beyond that 10% deposit. And I would say that's probably, if you were trying to go conventional, that's probably your next step, looking renovation. Because once you go hard money, then you're looking at 10 to 12% interest rates. The good thing about them is oftentimes you have a 6-month grace period where no payments are due. They're still accruing, and you're going to have a balloon payment at the end of those 6 or sometimes 12 months. But that is one easier way to get cash. Having said that, we mentioned they still want to get eyes on the property.
Yeah.
So unless you have a relationship with these hard money guys, most likely you're still going to need access.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I guess to your point, if you're not qualifying for a conventional loan, you might have a hard time with any other type of loan too. So that's where you may even want to look at bringing partners in. You know, if you're buying for yourself, maybe it's time to bow out. If you're looking at investing, definitely partners are a way to go. So like I've got a good friend who's a contractor too.
Okay.
And myself being a realtor, I can bring something to the table. He can bring something to the table. It works out.
Yeah.
You know, so that's something that we've talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about like liens or like unpaid property taxes, right? Oh, sorry. Before we get into all that, why don't we just talk about how does a house get into foreclosure?
Yeah. Good question. So really, it's just once you start missing your payments, you go on what's called a list pendants list, and anybody who's missed even one payment will go on that. So that's part of what we provide for the information service I run is current list pendants lists every month. But the lifespan of once you start missing payments to when you actually get foreclosed on is average 6 years.
It takes a long time, right?
Long time. And Hawaii is one of the most buyer-friendly states, which is great for those homeowners that are actually trying to get caught up and trying to make things right. There are a lot of others that they know the system and they can play the game. So I've got I won't, I'm not going to say who it is, but I know somebody bought a house foreclosure a few years ago.
Okay.
And now he's in foreclosure.
Okay.
But he's not concerned about it at all.
Because he knows it's going to take a while.
He knows what to do, right? So file bankruptcy, automatic 6-month extension. Nobody can touch him.
Oh.
And there's other things you can do. So I was going to one of my auctions, and there's this real old commissioner walking alongside me. We get to chatting. He's doing a home that he started on 10 years ago.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
And they still haven't closed on it.
He didn't even remember that it existed.
Wow.
So 10 years had gone by. The attorneys for the case reached out to him and said, oh, hey, why don't you go ahead and schedule this auction again? We're going to get going.
Yeah.
He showed up to the auction because they had found a way to delay it again. So he just had to be there to let everybody know it's still not happening.
Wow.
Yeah. So these things can take a long time.
And that just brings, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but that brings up a good point because we talk about, I know it takes a long time because just like you, like I know somebody that went through the foreclosure process.
Yeah.
And from when they stopped making payments until they actually got to auction, it was a long time, like years.
Yeah.
Like it was being rented out, they were collecting rent, and they got the notice of list pending and auction and foreclosure, but nothing happened.
Nothing happens. Yeah.
And so I bring that up because I think there's this misnomer, right, with home prices being so high and everyone think about this like, this real estate crash is going to happen. And they're like, watch, all these foreclosures are going to be down the pipe. I try to tell people, like, even if that were to happen,
6 years down
it's
there.
going to take a long time.
Yep, exactly.
Long
The
time.
ones that we're seeing now started a long time ago.
Exactly.
Like most of the cases I'm assigned to as a foreclosure, I'm seeing dates like 2015, 2016,
Crazy.
you know, so it takes a long time.
Is that a Hawaii
It's a Hawaii
specific
thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there may be other states that are like that, but Hawaii, I think for one thing, the courts just take a real long time to get anything done, but also they give every benefit to the buyer to try and make things right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I had another question. So let's say you're buying a property and there's a tenant or just somebody in there. What rights do you have at that point?
Well, so yeah, if there's a tenant,
Let's say legally and also non like a squatter. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yep. So exactly, if there's a tenant and there's a lease in place, then you're just like any other purchase. You'd be subject to that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not often that I see
Okay.
legal tenants in there, but squatters, that happens a decent amount, and it can take 6 months or so to get them out, and that's only after you've actually completed the purchase.
Sure.
So if you finance that thing, you're paying that whole time.
Just waiting.
And so I haven't gone through the process myself. I have a cousin who did. You basically have to turn to the sheriff's department. Those are the guys who will get them out. My cousin's case, it was kind of a druggy, like sketchy guy, a lot of guns around the property, a lot of drugs and stuff. And so the sheriff's department wasn't willing to just go barge in there.
Wow.
And so it took them a good 6 to 8 months to get them out. Yeah.
Right, because in your normal, if you're buying a house normally, I mean, this may or may not happen, but typically if you're buying it from the seller, once your 45 days, or even before the 45 days are out, you're going to do a final walkthrough.
Yep.
Right, they have to exit the property, you have to clean it, get it ready for you so that you move in.
Yeah.
In a foreclosure, there's none of that, right?
There's none of that,
It's different.
Well, and that's where we talked about earlier. Typically, if they're not doing an open house, there's a tenant in there. And so you're going to get the property cheaper because you're taking on a lot more risk, and that involves holdover tenants.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
that includes holdover tenants, I should say. Yeah. So luckily, I haven't had to deal with that even as a commissioner. Actually, I got one deal right now where it's the owners,
Oh, okay.
but they're still in the property and they know the system. So the attorneys have already told me, like, yeah, who knows, maybe sometime next year we'll get back on board. But, in the meantime, we never did the first auction. They filed bankruptcy the morning of.
To push it out, you
push
said
it
6
out.
months.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was about probably a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the bank can't touch them.
You can't touch them. Yeah. So there's a lot of methods to use to drag these things out.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. Any other like misconceptions? I mean,
let's see. Other Well, I think probably just financing is the
biggest one.
one. Yeah. And then it's not knowing really if it can be done. Just the whole thing in general, you know. I think a lot of people have heard of foreclosures, and then you'll go on Zillow, and what you find out over there, because I do think they have a foreclosure section.
I don't know. I think so. I think
most of these sites do, but those aren't the ones that we're dealing with.
Sure.
Those are what we would call pre-foreclosure.
Yeah.
People maybe are missing their payments, but that could be years out, you know. So, and some of those people will actually put their house on the market before it gets to this point where it's being auctioned off in court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings up a good point too. Right. The type of foreclosures that we're talking about, Jeremy's talking about now, that's not the only way to buy foreclosures, correct?
Yeah. So
there's different avenues, different.
Right. Well, and honestly, a lot of the hard money lenders that you talk to, they're not super used to the auction part of things. They're really used to the pre-foreclosure part of things. So people are working on these list pendants lists, investors really, and they're getting in touch with people who are behind on their mortgage, but they're not to this auction point yet.
Gotcha.
And that it's at that point where you find a willing buyer. You're also, of course, going to be buying at a discount, but you have access to the property. So whether that's conventional hard money, typically it's hard money because the buyers usually are at a point where they just don't want to, or the owners are at a point where they don't want to deal with it anymore. So they're willing to give a discount in exchange for a quick close.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's typically where hard money comes in, and that's where a lot of investors are getting their deals.
Yeah.
But there's even that's tricky. You really need to do your research on it, because there's stuff like I just learned this at a investor conference I was at the other week. You can't say, like, you can't approach somebody and say, hey, I want to help you, because then you get categorized, I guess, as a consultant.
Okay.
Which somehow brings liability on you. So even the language you use is important. And instead of saying help, you're saying, I want to assist you with this. There's little things like that. So again, it's just do your homework before you jump into that kind of thing.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously the biggest benefit of a foreclosure is getting something under price.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess to that point, there is kind of like an average range that we see as far as discounts. Yeah.
Okay.
So usually in the 20 to 30% discount range is what we'll see.
And that's single family homes, condos,
single family homes, condos. So just, I think 2 weeks ago, there was one that went at Turtle Bay.
Yes.
And Turtle Bay condos, that's one of the few legal vacation rental zones on the island, right? So this one went a little, actually, I don't know what the confirmation hearing ended up at, but in the initial auction, somebody got it for $750,000, but it was a leasehold. The fee was going to cost $120.
That's right.
So add that to it, you're at $870, and then you've still probably got, let's say, a $50,000 renovation or so. So you're at $920 then. But the house would sell for, those are going for 1.75 or so. You still have a margin on it, but it's not the 20 to 30%. You know? So it does depend on the property.
Okay.
But I would say on average, you're seeing somewhere in that 20 to 30%. And then I can tell you about another one where, and we talked about this on the phone the other day. So this one closed maybe a month ago. The original auction was won by the lender.
Okay.
They got it for they got it for, right around 500 actually.
Okay.
And then at the confirmation hearing, this realtor came in and he bought it for 550 at the confirmation.
Okay.
Before he could even sell it, or before he could even close the sale, two other guys from the area in which the house is called him up and they said, hey, we want to buy the contract from you. So he told them, no problem. You replace my deposit, which was, I guess, $55,000. And you pay me $100,000 on the side.
Crazy.
I'll give you the contract.
Crazy.
So they did it because the house was advertised, and legally it is a 3-bed, 2-bath, but it's also got a 1-bed, 1-bath downstairs, and it's got a carport space that needed a full renovation, but 2-bed, 2-bath.
Sure.
So you've got this and they didn't have that was one they didn't have an open house, so nobody knew.
Yeah.
So if you were the one who won that auction, you would have got it for $550.
Crazy.
The guys who got it are putting $150 into it. So let's say they would have been at $700. This is going to be probably 1.2-ish sale. So, there you got a $500,000 margin, not quite 50%, but you're probably at least 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it varies, but I would say on average 20 to 30 is normal.
Yeah. So I think, so if you have the means, right, if you have the money, if you have the patience to wear it out, and if you have, I guess, a good partnership around you in terms of knowing how much it's going to fix it up and to kind of protect you against all those liabilities, like foreclosure is a great opportunity to either one, like you said, as an investor, buy something at a really good price, potentially rehab it, flip it, sell it for a good number. Or number two, like even like yourself, like if you're just a regular home buyer, buy something at a super good discount and be able to walk in with instant equity like you guys did. Now, tell us, so before we get into, so the reason why I brought Jeremy here, one of the main reasons is to talk about this, but also to talk about a pretty good or pretty cool service that he just started, that he's providing to help people kind of get the information they need if they're interested in buying a foreclosure. Before we talk about it, Jeremy, I mean, where would people, how do people keep track of this stuff? Where do they look? What is available out there right now?
Right. So I mentioned that all of them have to be advertised in the Star Advertiser. So that's the only public notice. After that, it's up to the individual to get in touch with the commissioner and just keep tabs on where is this in the process. When is the confirmation hearing going to be? What are the liens on the property? All of that stuff. So part of the service that we offer is keeping track of all of that. So I would say we kind of have three main parts of the service. One is a listing database on the website. Okay. So we have a post for every foreclosure that comes up. And that will include what are the liens on the property. Actually, I should make a side note there and this is where it can get technical. There could be multiple liens on the property, but only one lender is suing or pursuing foreclosure.
Sure. Okay.
So you got to make sure that's where having a network, title company, realtor, contractor, all of these things play their role. If you don't know it, you're on your own.
If there's multiple liens on there, let's say you buy something for $500,000, but there's additional
all off.
So you're not only paying whatever you agreed upon in the court, but you're taking care of everything else to release the liens.
Right. And so there's different types of liens too. There's like like a HOA, homeowners association, they could be foreclosing. Yep. And so you could see, the foreclosure amount owed is $20,000. Well, maybe that's 5 years of HOA fees that are due, but there's also a mortgage behind that. So you could buy out the $20,000, but then that means the lender is going to come after you for that remaining mortgage amount too.
Yeah.
So it's important, what's the full set of liens on there. So with our site, we will give a mortgage history, but for a real complete full set, if somebody's interested, I would suggest make sure that they're working with a title company that could pull that report and give them
and clear it out. Yeah.
The full thing. So we partner with Old Republic, and they provide a majority of that info. But there's still more that I would recommend getting if you're serious on bidding.
Sorry, and when he says site, so Jeremy, him and his team, they created if you don't mind, start talking about that.
Yeah. So oahuforeclosure.com, that's the website. And like I mentioned, we got kind of three parts to it. It's really the listing database for every foreclosure that pops up. We do a calendar. It's a Google Calendar, so it's easy to add to your own. That way, it's kind of like an at-a-glance what's going on this week.
Like auction dates.
You'll see all the auction dates. You'll see the open houses, the confirmation hearings. So all of that's organized for you, and you can add it to your own Google Calendar, iCal, whatever you use. And then the third thing we do is we do a weekly email. Every Friday morning, we send out an email, and it's a summary of here's what happened last week, here's what's coming up next week. And so, again, we cover what are the new foreclosures that popped up over the past week, what are the results from the foreclosure auctions last week, what are the open houses coming up next week, and what are the confirmation hearings coming up next week. So that part is actually free. Anybody can sign up for that. You'll get all the addresses, at least, of the properties. To get the details, it's linked to all the different posts we have on the site. And of course, that part is paid.
Okay.
Every now and then, I throw a free one in there too, just so you can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
So whenever there's an open house, we send somebody out there to do a walkthrough video.
Oh, okay.
And that's helped a few of our investors who couldn't make it to a property but were interested in it. I send them the link to the post, and they get to see what the property condition is like.
Sure.
Yeah. So those are the main services we offer.
Right. So in recap, right. So if you're interested in a foreclosure, first you have to find out what properties are foreclosure. Potentially you have to go to the open houses. After that, there's the original auction date.
Yep.
And then after some time, there's the confirmation auction date.
Which is the one that really matters.
And then you close. Yeah. So there's all these little things that you kind of have to track.
Yeah.
And before, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, right before Jeremy created this list, the only way to do that was to see it on, if you had a newspaper, look at it, find out who the commissioner was, like Jeremy, and follow up with them. And Jeremy even said at some point, the commissioners, there's no obligation to let you know, message you back on the status of anything. But with this website that him and his team has provided, for anyone that's interested in these kind of services or interested in a foreclosure, can now get it all in one site, track it automatically, easily,
Yeah. The system is super disjointed. I mean, I think in an ideal world, I would just be able to charge the state for this and make it free to everybody.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
if they want the highest price for these properties, that's the thing that you do.
For sure.
But you know, is what it is. So what we do is you can subscribe either monthly or annually.
Okay.
So if it's monthly, we do 150 a month, and it's month to month. You can cancel whenever you want. If you do annually, it's $99 per month, but it's paid up front. So it comes out to, I think it's $1188 for a year.
Okay.
And so, you know, the idea being, if you're buying something, it's probably not going to be less than a few $100,000 at minimum. And if you pay $1,000 a year to make sure that you have that info, pretty good investment.
Yeah.
What I found when I was looking for foreclosures was that I wasn't super religious about tracking it. And I think that's the case with most people.
Sure.
So they tend to slip through the cracks, and that's where deals come into play for the people who do get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey, I know, you know, we talk a lot about my followers or just people that come across my videos. They talk a lot about how expensive Hawaii real estate, Hawaii homes are, how difficult it is for locals to get into a place. This is just one avenue that potentially you and your family can go down to see if you can pick up one of these homes at a really good price. Now, of course, caveat, like we said, there's a lot that you kind of, you know, you got to protect yourself, and you got to make sure you understand the process, understand what kind of liabilities you're getting into. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to myself or Jeremy. But this is really a great way to get a good home at a really good price, or you know, set up your kids or whatever it might be, a quick investment to get you something really good.
Yeah. So I guess couple of notes on that. One thing for anybody who finds this through your channel, we do have a discount code.
Cool.
So Home Keys Hawaii, you can type that in. It's 30% off whether you do monthly or annual, and that'll last for a year.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing I was going to say is, gosh, I'm blanking on it. But, well, you guys talk a lot about getting into homes cheaper. And like you said, this is one way for people to do that. There's a lot more that goes into it, so you want to step into it with eyes wide open. But it's doable, I think, is the message. And if you can save 20 to 30%,
that's huge.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there's a lot of people who won't do that, and this is kind of just a side note, pipe dream type thing. But one thing that I would love to be able to do, especially for you know, local families that are looking to get into their own home, is complete those purchases, maybe do a little renovation if needed to get it in condition to sell, and then sell it off to local families at a decent price. Yep. There's room to do that and still make a little bit of money. Sure. Like I said, I think that's kind of a pipe dream for me, but if I could do it, that's kind of the direction I would take things to.
For sure. You know, I think there's always this really not bad mentality, but this mentality where we talk about homes, we talk about investors, we talk about flipping. You know, automatically a lot of our local families see that and they think local, or they think outsiders. They think people coming out doing all this stuff and locals can't do it. But I'm sure you've seen so many local investors at your auctions.
Oh yeah. If you show up at the auctions, you've got maybe 10 people or so that are there every time. And of those, it's a fairly diverse crowd. I mean, I would say at least half of them are local guys who have they've been doing it for, 10 plus years. They figured out the system and they're doing pretty well with it. Yeah. I mean, the one I mentioned before where the one realtor got it and he turned around and just wholesaled the contract for $100,000. From what I hear, he's got like 18 of those going. Crazy. So I don't know if they were all foreclosures, but he's got a lot of deals going, So they're out there. This is one way to find them. Yeah. And whether that's buying your own home or looking as an investment, I kind of view mine as an investment too. I mean,
any house you buy in Hawaii.
Yeah. When we got it, we picked up, it was 262,000 in equity right away. Just based on the purchase price versus the appraised value. if we look at it now, we're probably at around 400,000 in equity. You know, whether I sell that someday and cash it out, I don't know, but I can pull HELOCs from it. Like there's ways that it's helping me, or it will help me as an investor too.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, hey, appreciate the time. If anybody has questions, you can reach out to me through the website. There's contact
What's the website
forms
again?
on there. It's oahuforeclosure.com. And remember, discount code is HomeKeys Hawaii.
Awesome. So we're going to tag Jeremy, all of his socials. That way you can connect with him. We're going to make sure that we include his website in there as well. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I can get you connected with him. But at the very least, just check it out. Look at it. Kind of dive deep a little bit into what that foreclosure system is like or process is like, and just find the way for you and your family. But if nothing else,
right on.
Thank you guys so much. Catch you on the next one. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff, and hit up Jeremy and myself with any questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Mahalo.